thanks for coming on here. Like, as you're probably aware, like I talk so much about like periods and female hormones, and I feel that where I have to stop is when it comes to advice, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to provide advice for people. So that's where I'd love to want to reach out to people like yourselves that does have the qualifications, and you do know your stuff when it comes to this, to be able to give the people that follow me a little bit more. And I think there's so much power in education, and it's one thing that I really found with my getting my period back is the value of education, and not just necessarily in how much food we should be eating or like how we should train for our bodies, that type of thing. It's the education in mindset. Probably best if you maybe introduce yourself and tell everyone like what it is you do and like the services you offer.
Yeah, okay. So I am Dr. Rachel Evans. I'm getting used to calling myself doctor because it sounds better. Yeah. And because I have a PhD in the psychology of eating, and I also have specialist training to work with people with eating disorders. So that's what I do now after my own recovery from an eating disorder. And then I'm like a CPD, like continuing professional development addict. Like I always like doing new courses and learning. So I'm also a hypnotherapist, and recently I did Neuro-Linguistic Programming as well, which we might come on to talk about maybe. I have a private practice in Derby, and I do consultations online as well.
Oh my gosh, you've got so many. Is it belts up your sleeve? What do they say? What's the saying? I don't know what said it. You
just your bow, or like so many belts. That would be weird. I'm just like,
you're probably going to watch this and think, like, oh, for God's sake, like, start off talking like your experience with eating disorders, then, because I know you talk a lot about it on your own Instagram, and I think for someone like me or others that have eating disorders, it's actually really nice to see, because even though you're a professional, you've gone through it yourself. So yeah, if you don't mind just giving like a little bit of a lowdown, and I'll probably add in a few more about like my sort of journey as well, and how that
Yeah, and I'm actually finding people that say that more often now, like that they want to work with me because I have experience as well. But I feel like first, when I was training, it was like, oh, keep it a secret, like you don't want anyone to know you've got something wrong with you. I think I was still in that mindset. Yeah. That's what it is, which obviously it isn't. So for me, I feel like when I was doing my undergrad, which I did psychology undergrad, like I went through periods of like going on a diet, and I was very much mindset like, oh, slim is better, you know, stereotypical of that, or like boys will like me more if I've lost weight. And I did lose some weight at one point because I was doing a lot of training for a sports team, and obviously wasn't eating enough for the training, and I did do some, and then I got like some compliments on that, and then you think, oh, this is nice, and then it's kind of that like, oh well, I can't put the weight back on now, but I had periods when I was more bothered or less bothered about it. I wouldn't say it definitely wasn't an eating disorder. I look back at certain times when maybe I was tracking a lot of food that I was eating and not eating very much, and feeling I had to go to the gym every day, which probably was more disordered behavior now I look back on it. But it's kind of like I could snap out of it for periods, like it would be for a while and then I would snap out of it, but things really changed, and I didn't snap out of it when I started my masters. I've realized looking back now, I also lost a lot of things that gave me self-worth. So like I'd stopped doing the sports team, and like a lot of my friends had moved away. Well, I call it brain room, but like my brain room that was on other things was now like, oh, let's just focus that on food. That's something that you can be good at now, like what you're going to eat, eating healthy as possible.
Yeah, I love that. I've never thought of it like that. Actually, yeah, when we split up eventually, it was my one thing to go to. And it was like, actually, that was just, yeah, that's so interesting. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, I agree with you though. And like I say, part of my motivation was like, oh, boys will think differently of me. Whereas now my like mindset shift is like, well, if they need me to look that certain way, or they need me to do that, then I don't really want to be associated with them.
Back at like the people that I probably hung around with and were surrounding myself with around the times that I was probably my most disordered, and it's like, actually now that I'm at the end of it, like they're not the sort of people that I would hang around with at all, and that's no shade to them. It's just that I've gone down a different path. I'm now the hippie that sits and pulls oracle cards on my floor.
It's difficult, like accepting that friendships change and friendship groups change. Like I think we want to keep the same friends forever, but it doesn't, and then sometimes that can be a factor in eating disorders too, like we said. So then for me, yeah, funny that we're talking about this actually. I think what really like sealed the nail in the coffin that it wasn't just a phase was I was going out with this guy. I thought we were going out. He didn't think we were going out. But then we went on a night out, and to be fair, he did try to uninvite me, but I was like, no, I'll still come, it's fine. He just ignored me the whole time, was talking to other girls. Like his friends were like, I'm so sorry he's acting like this. I mean, it had only been like 3 months anyway, but I was just like, oh my God. And he was very sporty. He was like very gymmy. And so when he dumped me, I was like, oh, I've got to get a revenge body. And so I started working out even more and eating even less because I thought that was a good way to do things. And then I think with eating disorders, it's sometimes once you get past that certain tipping point, that actually then I was becoming scared to eat. It was like, if I don't exercise today, I'm going to be very anxious and I can't stop thinking about it. And then like, just my whole brain just started getting taken up by food and exercise. And I think once that starts happening, then your other hobbies and your other interests drop away even more, and then you get so stuck in it. And also this was kind of the time, like, well, how people say like the rise of clean eating, when like more bloggers were coming out. And so I was looking at all of their things like, oh, these people say cut out that food, these people say cut out that food. So I was like trying to follow everyone else's rules as well.
Everyone at the same time, right? So someone might say don't eat gluten, someone says just eat spinach, someone says and I'm trying to do them all.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate. And then you try and do them all and it's like, oh my God, there's no food that's okay, or there's like this one food that's okay. And so for a while I was like, inverted commas, very good at that. I was just restricting, and that was that. Like very occasionally would I binge on food, but mostly, you know, I was pretty like good at it. And then I lived abroad in that time, and I ended up coming home because then the other like characteristics of eating disorders, like we talked about a little bit earlier, like I was quite isolated when I was living abroad. Then I couldn't really make new friends, because to make friends you basically go out for food or go out for drink or be social, and I didn't want to go out for the food and drinks. Like I did sometimes, but I was very overly concerned about the food and obviously couldn't really focus on making friends. And then at weekends I'd just like walk just round and round, because I didn't have friends to do stuff with because of the eating disorder. I didn't know what else to do, so I'd just spend hours walking around, so I didn't make the most of that. And oh yeah, also then because I wasn't eating enough, then my mood was all over the place and I would like cry at work and I was very homesick. So then I ended up coming home early, like because of that, and finishing my contract, which I felt really bad about at the time, but I think it was a good decision. Like I don't think it would have got any better if I'd stayed.
And I think sometimes you've got to protect yourself, right? I've actually had similar in uni. So I would say uni was probably one of the peak times. Oh, I don't know, there's been so many peaks. Was one of my like waves, if you like. And I was living at home. I was single, and I personally, so I was with a guy for eight years on and off. So I was like 14 when we first got together. When we ended, fitness, he was all I'd ever known, and fitness then became my one thing that I will know. And it was kind of like that, okay, I'm stepping out into the world by myself, who shall I be? And it was like, I'll become this fit one. And when I was at uni, I actually really struggled as well. Like people must say, oh, you must be going out loads of times. Don't get me wrong, like uni was amazing. I lived at uni for a little bit and had like the best time, but actually a big chunk of it was a really shit time looking back. I was like getting up, I was living at home, I was getting up, I was going to the gym, I was doing a HIIT class, I would get on the train, I would have to sleep on the train with a coffee. Then at any given time I would be up, I would eat chicken and a handful of spinach at 11 o'clock and at 1 o'clock, and that was it. And then before I left, I had a coffee, 6 almonds and 6 raisins before I went back to the gym for about another hour and a half. I would go home and I would have a chicken salad for dinner, and I would go to bed, and I would pat myself on the back if I had a growly tummy. And it was like, wow, like look, it's at that time I thought this was exactly what I needed to do. And it was like I had to be that skinny one, and I was the fit one. And at uni I shaped my whole course to be around sportswear and fitness, so I had attached this label to myself that was like, shit, I've got to keep this up.
Because I was just thinking, so actually some of the people that were in my office when I was in Singapore are like so lovely, and two of them I was particularly friends with, like found out I had an eating disorder. They're like, oh my god, we had no idea, because my body looked different too at the time. Like, we thought you were just really fit and you were really healthy.
Yeah.
But because they only knew me like that, they didn't know what I was like before.
100%. Yeah, I was exactly the same. Everyone, because I just jumped into fitness completely fully, it was like every single part of my life was fitness. Even on a weekend I'd be wearing gym clothes, so it was like that. To everyone else, I was just the fit, healthy one. And don't get me wrong, like, I guess that I became so labeled as the fit one that then at the thought of ever breaking out of that was just like never gonna happen. And the thought of when I lost my period, I came off the pill and didn't get my period back, it was like, oh shit, something's gonna have to change. But I can't, because I'm the fit one. So when it came to your experience with that sort of stuff, like how did you start to realize that there was a problem, and what sort of things did you do to try to like steer yourself a little bit further on?
Yeah, so I think you kind of said that, like, I think when people have an eating disorder, like sometimes it comes on quicker than others, sometimes it can start from a sort of diet place. Like, I think it sounds like we were both kind of starting it from going on a diet rather than just being, well, not just, but rather than being scared of food in the first place. What was the question? Sorry, sometimes I explain something on a tangent and then my brain is like, what?
How did you start to...
How did I get out of it? Oh yeah, so that's what I'm going to say. So I was in denial for quite a while, like all the time I was living abroad. Like when my dad came out to see me, he was like, you need to eat more. Yeah. And so I bought some food that I was going to eat, but I was like, I can't even add this one thing in. Like, I've got, these are the things that I eat. This is what I eat for lunch. Kind of like you were saying, this is what I eat for lunch. I know I should add this in, and I can see what he's saying, but I'm actually scared to do that. And then when I came home, I was living with my parents, and then they were like, well, can you please work in our factory as a receptionist, because they only had one receptionist and she had gone. I would always fall out at home because they could see that I was like ill, and then I would have to be at work, and then like I say, you're just not really as resilient when having an eating disorder, and then your mood is probably all up and down. And then it was, so I didn't see it for a while, and my dad kept being like, you're going to end up in hospital, like, I'm not seeing you do that. I don't know what it was, maybe just because he kept on at me. Like, eventually I was like, okay, I will see a therapist. He's like, I'll pay for you to go and see a therapist. I don't think it was really coming from me. Actually, I think I probably more wanted to see the therapist because I was unhappy with my life rather than I was unhappy about eating.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to keep falling out with my family all the time, and like literally I just wanted to run away. I just wanted to run away, like move to a different country or just move to a different place, because I didn't like what was going on. But I was like, well, that's not feasible because I don't have any money. So I'll just go and see a therapist then. I mean, she helped me with like life direction and those sort of things, but I started binge eating.
Oh, wow.
Like really uncontrollable. Like I woke up in one night, and I always like tell the story like this because this is how it happens. So someone might have heard me say it before if they've seen me on something else, but it's literally like you're saying about like, I wanted to go to bed hungry, like that was a good thing. I wouldn't have anything after my dinner, like, but I was really hungry all the time. Then it's hard to go to sleep sometimes when you're really hungry. And this one night I just woke up in the night and I was like, I'm so hungry, I need to go and eat something. But then the eating disorder part was really angry, but I was like, no, I really like can't sleep, like my really need to go and have something to eat. So I made like a safe food, which for me was like porridge. But then I put some toppings on that like weren't allowed. But I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm really hungry. So I made this. Like, I had one spoon and I was so angry with myself. Like, I just left it there and I was really upset. And I just went back to bed. And then I woke up again and it was like still on the counter downstairs. And I went down and I like ate it. And I just describe it like, because my parents' kitchen has got like overhead lights. Okay. And I just say it was literally like this light was like angel. It was like, ah, it was like the best thing I've ever tasted still. It was like, oh, really? Oh my God, like, this, oh my God, just food that you're eating that isn't the lowest calorie thing ever, and you know, like super restrictive. And so unfortunately then every night then I would wake up and go and eat something, but it got like more and more. So everything that I wouldn't let myself eat in the day, so like unhealthy or like junk food, or even just like we said, the random rules of stuff that I couldn't have because I had whatever in it, that I would just start binging on everything, to the point that like my mum had to hide like her favorite yogurt in the fridge. Like I had to try and hide it because it's like I knew at the time, I was like, don't eat your mum's yogurt because she wants it. But it was like, no, I'm just gonna, do you know, like the proper like tubs of yogurt, not just the little ones. Like I just felt so compelled. And I think as well, like you said at the beginning, like some of my clients tell me this, that they do the same, and it's like I can understand when it feels like it's not even your choice, like it is. Like my parents would be like, well, can you just not go to sleep, or like just do something else? And I'm like, no, I literally can't.
Yeah,
but
it's quite I personally I'm very grateful that I never went so far down. I very much stayed in the fitness addiction dieting, but I can easily see how easy it is to go down that route. I would eat a toffee crisp, talking about how that was like a form of eating disorder, and it just clicked in my head that I was like, oh shit, I did that. There's loads of things that I remember being at a barbecue. My mum had caterers in, and I must have been like 17. No, actually it was in uni time, and yeah, definitely in uni time, and I had about 4 burgers. Bearing in mind we had caterers in, so they were like the proper restaurant burgers, and I had about 4, and then mum did like loads of different cheesecakes and stuff for dessert. She went up to like the macro and stuff and just bought like loads, and I reckon I had about 8 different desserts, and to the point that I was so full it was up here. There's been other times that at Easter, you know, the huge Lindt Easter eggs, where I had obviously been under eating for so long and training so hard for so long. When it came to Easter, my mum bought me the Lindt egg, and I was like, wicked, this is going to last me about 8 weeks, and I'll let myself have a Lindt ball maybe like once, maybe like 2 a week after leg day, because obviously that's when you use the most. Do you know what I mean? There was so many different patterns, and I ended up eating all Lindt balls and the egg in about 15 minutes. When you were going through that, you mentioned there about it was your family that kind of then got you to help, and you started to go to therapy and things, but what sort of tips do you have for anyone that might be going through this? Like, where would you say to start? Like, so someone watching this might think, oh God, actually, yeah, I do have a few tendencies of disordered eating, or they might be completely aware of it, and they might be watching this because of the title or whatever. Someone came to you and said, look, this is what I'm going through. What would be, do you have any top tips, or what would be like the first steps that someone could start to take just to start that ball rolling?
Yeah, so I think the first step, like you say, is awareness, which you've obviously got awareness if you're already watching this video, because I think often like my new way to explain this is like, I think when you're in the eating disorder, like I was saying about the denial, it's like you're in the box, but you can't see out of it. So it's like a cardboard box, so you can't even see out the sides. And then I think what happens is you kind of realize, oh, my life is like this. Actually, maybe I don't want my life to be like this. Like you say, maybe my periods have stopped, and actually I've realized that means that maybe I'm not as healthy as I thought I would, or like I can't eat out with my friends, and actually that's really important to me. Unfortunately, it is very hard to help people when they're in the box and they can't even see that they're in a box, because I know I was very defensive to begin with. When my parents were trying to help me, I was like, stop it, I don't want to eat like you, like, you know, I'm not going to take your advice, even though I can see now they would say like balance and moderation, and I would get really angry at them, whereas now I eat balance and moderation. I feel fine. But at the time
I very much put the bloggers and the healthy, I was in such a state of judgment that I looked at everyone that didn't eat like me and didn't eat like the bloggers that followed me as a form of judgment. And it was like, I kind of used the healthy fit one as like an ego boost. So when someone tried to help me, the way I would look at it and be like, well, you eat that. So someone's aware that they might have listened to your story and thought, God, yeah, I've got that. What would be the next stage from awareness?
Yeah, so I think awareness is like you're in the box, but it's like a clear box and you can see out. So I think that's when the first things that I start to do when I help people, and I've got like a free ebook that kind of goes through this, is like recognizing, okay, what is my life like now? What is my life like now? And like we say, listing the things that maybe might be good to change, the things that are making you unhappy, or other people are telling you, okay, maybe this isn't a good thing. And then like trying to look outside of your box, like what do I want my life to be like, or like what was my life like before this, what are the elements that I would want to get back or I would want to improve on. And then the next bit is trying to work out like what is keeping you stuck. So like what are the benefits of how you're behaving now that would change if you changed, because that's often what keeps people stuck, because it's of fear coming from the eating disorder, but it like doesn't come true. Well, it doesn't come true. So for example, like we were talking about the brain room, often when I do that activity with my clients, either in like a breakthrough session, which I do like sort of one-off sessions, but then also if people work with me for longer, we'll do it sort of the first thing in the program. They're like, well, what am I going to think about if I don't think about food? Like that is a reason not to recover, because you're like, oh, well, I don't know what I'm going to do then. If I don't do this, that's going to be difficult.
I think a big one for me was the weight gain. It's like, oh my God, but I've worked so hard to get to this size. I feel good when I go into the shops and I have to buy the same size as my naturally slim friend. And that was my biggest fear. And actually what I would say is I am now a dress size bigger, and I hands down feel sexier and so much more confident in my skin than I did when I was a dress size smaller.
Yeah, so let's talk about all these things. Firstly, just about the brain room type thing. When I ask people at the end of 3 months of working with me, or whenever they finish working with me, like, is that a problem? Like, what do you think about now? And they're like, oh, I just think about day-to-day stuff. I didn't literally have to sit down and think, what should I think about if I'm not thinking about food? So that is fine. And then like you say about the weight gain, I think when you're struggling with disordered eating or the eating disorder, because obviously that is a lot about weight and shape and fear of that, I think people's logical brain, they realize, oh, if I was to change and I was a dress size bigger but happier, that would be okay. But there's still a part of them, like you said, that's like, no, that is not okay. Could I be happier like that? So I think it's willing, like, to see, could I?
Last thing that I said.
You said about dress size, and did you say something else?
Just about like being sexier and more confident.
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, so thinking if you're not getting your periods, that means that your sex hormones aren't working properly. So you're like low libido or like low sex drive is actually like a characteristic of having an eating disorder too. So like those things are going to change, but part of the reason is psychological, but part of the reason is physiological as well.
Yeah, and I feel like I was very much at the very start was very much in the blame of everyone else was the problem. And it was actually only when so that obviously a lot of people know from my side it was the period that was kind of like the catalyst, and coming out of a relationship and kind of wanting to have a bit of a life back, I realized I'm like, okay, well, my whole life can't be in this gym. But it was only as I started that healing process that I was then able to be like, oh God, yeah, I was a bitch then, wasn't I? And it's like, yeah, I blamed them for that. And actually, yeah, I was probably miserable, or I would be called miserable and probably warranted being called miserable because I wasn't eating. Do you know what I mean? And it was only after the steps and the awareness and that I was then able to be like, okay, yeah. And then being like, okay, now I could change, because the blame wasn't on them. And I wasn't blaming myself as such. It was like the awareness has taken that next step. So I was aware of the patterns that I was doing, and I was able to see the past patterns, and it was like, okay, yeah, let's move forward.
Yeah, I think like you say, that recognizing the different patterns is so important if you don't want to keep repeating them. And it's kind of like, what can I learn from what happened last time so I can do it differently next time?
Yeah, definitely. So from that stage then, that the like working on that, I guess people could do this as journaling as well, right? If they thought that there were patterns that that maybe other people had found. So maybe mum always comments on the fact that you don't eat anything. You find that you're always the one ordering a salad and you just want to enjoy a burger. You could write all of those down into a journal, right? And then potentially flip it and go, okay, what are the sort of things would you want to order a burger, or why would you want mum to stop commenting on how much you eat? Could that be like a journaling exercise, and then also do like the benefits as like a journaling exercise as well? Would you recommend that?
Yeah, I think so. So how I kind of do it with people is looking at what are the benefits of staying the same. Like we said, maybe like, oh, I don't have to face the fear of gaining weight. That would be a benefit of staying the same. What are the cons, the negatives of staying the same? So probably health, maybe like your relationships being affected, all of those things. And then what would be the cons of changing? I would have to face the fear of weight gain, or I'd start eating more. I don't know what to think about. And then what are the benefits of changing? And then have a look which is standing out to you the most. So like you say, the benefit might be, oh, that I am able to have a burger if I want one, rather than sitting there wanting one and not having it. And see how your life would change because of that. And then the next step that I obviously work through my clients with, but you can do it yourself too, although I think sometimes it's hard because
I was about to say that
the eating disorder is like blinkering you, but you still can of like, okay, well, these are the things that are keeping me stuck. What would I need to do to get unstuck because of that? So it might be like, okay, I'm going to watch a YouTube video from someone who's recovered and says actually they're happier at a dress size up. Maybe that could happen for me too.
I think that's actually the YouTube thing. The social media cull was so beneficial for me. Looking at actually, how does this person make me feel? Does this person make me want to change myself in terms of body image? Yes. Okay, she's got to go. And I just had to explain, like, your gym videos were triggering me because I knew I had to cut back, and every time I saw your video it made me feel as if I should be there. So the social media, and then seeking out people like coming to your posts and seeking out other people that are talking about self-worth and self-growth and that recovery and mindset. I really dived into like self-help books, but finding that stuff on social media was so helpful. And then it's just having the confidence, which I guess people would have through working with yourself, to unfollow and to mute and actually start to leave that past behind.
Yeah, I think another one as well is like trying to help people think of different like outcomes. So I think often people might think, even for example, like, oh, that person said that I look well, that must mean something bad. Just trying to be, well, maybe it could also mean this, or it could also mean that, and like trying to help yourself get unstuck by seeing different possibilities rather than just the one that eating disorder is telling you and questioning that.
Yeah, I understand. So I think correct me if I've got this wrong, but it's like, I should stay this size because such and such. I actually still remember a guy that I know really well in the gym. He came over to me and was like, at my smallest, he was like, "Cool, you're looking in such good shape. You can really see it here." And as soon as he did that, I then became obsessed with that. And actually it's still a one thing that I look at. And he was just obviously being like really confident, but my disordered side of me was like, okay, you've got to stick at that. You've got to stick at that. But then actually looking at that other possibility of like, my stepmom might say, "Cool, Chloe, you're looking little there," and she'd just like sort of just be like, "Looking little," and it's like actually looking at the different possibilities. So from one person, they might be saying what their perception of it is, and then there's another perception is about actually what your eating disorder or your disordered eating is trying to tell you is only ever one perception, and there's so many different perceptions.
Yeah, or like you say, even if it was as well thinking about, okay, well, he said that to me, that's making me think, okay, smaller here is better. But also kind of questioning like, okay, well, where's his opinion coming from? Does he have a good body image himself? Like, what is he focused on? He doesn't know what's healthy for me, and trying to unpick that as well sometimes, because like you say, the eating disorder likes to latch on to something like that.
I guess there's so many different, and this is where your work would be so amazing, because I can already see myself a year ago sat with a journal and thinking, okay, there's that, like there's so many different ways to pull everything apart, isn't there? Like, and I think your work is obviously really helping to keep it nice and structured for someone and work through each process individually. So going from like a level up from that, so we've kind of become aware, and you've done those sorts of tasks. What would you suggest to someone outside of your sessions that they could be doing? Would it be things like, you know, filling your diary? I always say that some of the best things that I did would be to fill my diary with things that were fun, or that would put myself in situations that I couldn't kind of control. So I would say, hey, to my friend Zoe, hey, I'm going to come yours for a roast on Sunday. And it's like, I couldn't control what was being cooked then. So I would have to eat it. Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. Are there any little things like that you would potentially do, like encourage your clients to do outside of a session to help themselves?
Yeah, so I would say, to me, when you're saying, I don't think you mean it like that, but little things like that, to people usually when they start working with me, that is like a massive, massive thing. Wow. And they would just be like, no, like literally I can't even do that. Like that would just, you know, when you were saying that, I was thinking, this seems like, they can't go there. Like even mostly when people start working with me as well, like if it's restrictive eating, they're like worried to eat out because of what other people are going to judge them for. So they're kind of, like you said, there's that judgment of other people about what they're eating, but also thinking, because I'm judging other people like that, other people must be thinking that about me, which is rarely the case because other people don't think that much about food. But just all that worry and the not control, and like you were saying at certain points for you, that strict list of things that people can eat. And I think the worry would be too much. So if you can do that and put yourself in the different challenging situations, that's really good. But if it starts as something smaller, of like, okay, I'm just going to have that one new food this week, I actually don't really focus. I do focus on the food with people sometimes, and we kind of focus on it more of saying, like, at the minute they maybe have a good list and a bad list. Like, can we put some foods from the bad list into a sometimes list? Okay. Obviously making sure that they're eating enough for health and energy from the good allowed foods list. But like, can we just add in these sometimes? You don't have to have them all the time, but just so you've got some flexibility. So it's more about flexibility. Like very rarely am I like, oh, right, eat this specific food, that's your challenge this week. Unless like this week, one of my clients specifically said she wants to do that because she bought a food that would be on the sometimes list. And she's like had it in the cupboard for 2 weeks and hasn't eaten it. And so obviously, because we can't talk about everything ever in one session, I kind of was asking her about that like a couple of weeks later. And she's like, oh, it's in my cupboard and my mum has said like, oh, do you want to eat it? Better check she's okay with me saying this. It's pretty general. It could probably be anyone, but I'm sure she wouldn't mind. So she was like, actually, yeah, make it. If you tell me to do it, then I'll do it, but I'm not going to do it myself. So tell me to do that before next week.
Oh my gosh, exactly. I've got to say that is exactly where I was at when I started working with Rena McGregor, my dietitian. I talk about her in like every single video. Rena never told me anything that I didn't know, apart from she really analysed my hormones and told me I had like no estrogen.
Yeah.
But when it came to food and fueling and stuff like that, I was a personal trainer. Like I knew what I was telling my clients to do, and I would turn a client away if they weren't fueled for a session or if they had like a stressful day or something. And it's so Rini never told me anything that I didn't know. I just needed someone else, and I think it really helped having a professional tell me that as well. And it's the same like if I've done like any therapy sessions, it's never been anything that I don't already know. It's just, I sometimes think working with a professional, it just gives you that like, tell me to do it and I'll be able to do it.
Yeah, I think you seem quite self-aware in that. Like I see people at all different stages. Like sometimes it is, if people are like, how did I even get to this situation? I really don't know like what's happened. And then so we do some like, going back into the past, like maybe what has led you here. And then often people can like, I don't know. And actually I think if people have come at an eating disorder not from the nutrition place, from it being like a safety coping mechanism of not eating, then they possibly don't know as much about nutrition. So when I'm saying the nutrition things, like for example, maybe some clients say, well, I keep binge eating, And then, like we kind of already talked about before, maybe it's because you basically haven't eaten all day and your body is like, can I have some food, please? But then you're so hungry that then you end up binge eating. And sometimes people are like, oh, like I didn't know that if I just ate more balanced throughout the day, I would actually avoid that uncontrollable binge feeling, which is what I really want to avoid. And actually, you're not going to put on more weight distributing your food throughout the day. It's actually better for you than just doing it all in the evening. So sometimes people don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's why working with a professional is something that I always try to steer people to. I can talk about my story and or everything I've learned from like self-worth and self-growth books and spirituality and stuff like that, but I don't think you can ever put a price on working with a professional, because you guys are the ones that can help guide us and give us that information that we probably don't know. I'd love to talk a little bit about the therapies that you use to help people. So your hypnotherapy, and I know, sorry, forgive me, I've forgotten the one that you said after as well. I'd love to talk about those. And just really quickly, I don't know how we're doing for time.
I think we've got like 20 minutes. I don't know if it's going to be an hour.
Yeah, just to talk about those in terms of how you would approach that. Maybe just like a top line, so like benefits of like hypnotherapy and that sort of thing, and your approach to that, because I am a huge fan of hypnotherapy personally. So yeah, sorry, over to you. I'm rambling.
Okay, so
alternative therapies.
Yeah, I guess I'll just start with the overview first of like before I decided to train in the hypnotherapy. That I was just feeling like with some clients there's something so underlying it. So like we kind of said maybe earlier, like the poor body image or just poor self-esteem. And we could talk about food and, you know, okay, we'll eat this, eat that. Don't be scared of food till the cows come home. Yeah. But actually we really need to address those deeper things. And like I say, when sometimes people are so, I was going to say unaware, that's maybe sounds a bit offensive, I don't know, but when they're just really like not sure where all of this came from. And I was just finding like I'm trying to use my techniques, like different questioning, we're doing activities in the sessions, but we're not getting to what is that, like think that we really need to flip, like what are these beliefs? And so that's why I decided to do the hypnotherapy as well. And so the kind that I do, like, well, you already know, Chloe, but it's called Rapid Transformational Therapy. And it did kind of get me on the marketing, and I knew a lady who had trained in it as well, and it sounds kind of cheesy, but basically what we do in that is like you're in hypnosis. So hypnosis just feels like if you've done a meditation.
The way before. I describe hypnosis is, I tried to explain it, my boyfriend, that you're in such a deep relaxation that I often feel as if my body has just like, my soul has just like sunk a little bit further into my body. So it's like the most peaceful state that you can think of, and you're so aware of everything. Like you could take the neighbor shutting the door and like car door or whatever, but you are so just like present and so deep in your body. That's how I describe it. I love it.
Yeah, so I think, like you kind of said, I think people kind of forget about their body as well. You're just kind of there. So I think as well, because you've got your eyes shut, obviously, like I think it just helps people get that awareness.
I sometimes go a little bit like tingly or numb, where I get into like that real deep state. I'm like, I think I'm stuck. In a good way, like just to like clarify, it's such a deep relaxation. If you've ever had like a real deep tissue massage and you're just like there like, oh guys, I can't move.
Yeah, and I think as well, if someone's had hypnotherapy and it doesn't feel like that, like that's okay too, because sometimes it's still working, but sometimes people do it, like most of my clients do get that deep relaxation, but sometimes people are like, oh, I just felt like I was talking with my eyes shut. But then we still get the changes. So it's not that it's not working, it's just that's how they've experienced it. And I think as well, it's like we're talking to your subconscious mind, but then your conscious mind is still there to be like, am I doing this right? Oh, that was a bit weird. How did I come up with that answer? Because the kind that I do, so my client will be talking to me and we'll be exploring together what is underlying this, like what beliefs did you form about yourself that obviously aren't serving you now and aren't helping you, and so how can we help them to reframe those beliefs? And then at the end of the session, I do the more like traditional inverted commas hypnosis, like the positive suggestions, what they want their life to be like, and then they'll get a recording to listen to.
I just feel everyone should try it at least once. I've just seen such huge transformations for it, and even if you don't consciously get something out of it straight away, but just experience just like a nice just present and just like coming back to your body and your thoughts.
Yeah, so even if people don't get obviously the massive breakthrough, which is what everyone wants, but it doesn't always happen, that actually they do feel more, I don't know what the word is, I'm going to say resilient, but they feel able, okay, if those old situations came up, actually I could talk back to the eating disorder thoughts now, or I can think about it in a different way, even if they have to do that bit of conscious effort to do it. But it's so much easier than when it was just the eating disorder dictating everything to them. But I think with hypnosis, it's easier if the person wants to change. I guess it's with every therapy though.
Yeah. What about the other one that you mentioned? Sorry, I've forgotten which one you mentioned.
Yeah, so recently I did Neuro-Linguistic Programming as well. So it's because the kind of hypnotherapy that I do as well, like, I think my problem is I want my clients to get quick results, obviously. Like, that's why I want to be like a really good therapist, but it doesn't always happen like that if we're trying to change people's really ingrained beliefs. And so before, there's a kind of questioning that I can do for people, but it's not like, oh, okay, I've just changed my belief. It's like they go away and then maybe 2 weeks later they're thinking differently about something. So the neuro-linguistic programming is like, I can just do it in a session and it's like way shorter than the hypnotherapy, to help people change more like specific beliefs or let go of specific things. And it's basically thinking like, when our brain stores stuff in pictures and images,
Right.
And so it's like our brain has different filing cabinets of things. So like maybe the foods that I'm scared of, how can we move things around in the filing cabinets in your head and change the pictures to then change how you think about that thing?
Wow.
And it's really cool. So like some of the stuff is like we get a picture of like the things that you like and you believe, and then things, so like a positive behavior that you want to have and that you believe, and then the negative one that you're trying to change. And so we just change the pictures of the negative one to look more like the positive one. So like we change the color and we change the size and all of those things.
What I would picture in my head about my worst possible scenario, it might be like really grey and I guess dull. And actually what I would flip it to is actually just really bright yellows and blues.
Yeah.
And that could actually just be a way of like swapping it out and changing patterns.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's just one of them. There are like lots of different, similar but different things to do. But I think it's just really nice. It gives people different tools, and then if you learn it, and then also the other new one I learned was like time techniques. So we get people to think about their timeline. So like if I ask you, where is your past, which way would you point? Okay, and which way is the future? Okay, so it's like you've got a line and that's your timeline, and then basically we get people to like close their eyes and imagine that you're floating above your timeline, and then we can do things like we can address things in the past and get learnings from those things. So it could be that you're trying to release like the negative emotion of fear, and then we sort of learn something and then we apply it to events and come back to now. And then we can also like put goals in the future of your timeline, so then your brain has something to work towards. Wow. That's positive.
Oh, that's so nice. So I could potentially pick myself up and I'm floating, and I would go back to a time that I didn't really feel good enough, or I felt inadequate of some sort. And would we work through that, or would we just acknowledge that?
Yeah, so we want to go back to the first time that you felt like that. So often people, well, I did it with my sister the other day, and we only went back to stuff in her 20s, which for me, being the psychologist, I'm like, oh, I think stuff must have happened before then for you to have felt like this now. You wouldn't feel like this now if the things hadn't happened before. But I was like, okay, well, this is what you're saying, so we'll just do that. And it seems to have worked. But I was just like, oh, apply it to things in the further back too. And yeah, so we don't go into the scene and we don't get attached to it, to all the negative emotions there. It's not like we're sending you back to be re-traumatized about something. We're like trying to look at it like this is, don't just try it yourself at home. Like, I mean, you could, but different steps. So we're just looking at it and thinking, oh, what did I need to learn from that situation? That then if I apply it in the future, that I'm going to avoid that thing. So sometimes, like you say, the learning would be like, oh, I was always good enough, or that person was just judging me because they were jealous, or do you know, just these things that we didn't realize at the time, but we've made this belief about ourselves.
Working with someone like yourself, you're able to make people realize that, like you said about like trying it at home, like no one's ever, or it's very unlikely that someone's going to get out of it what they would get out of it with you, because your job is to help us change change our perception and our self-worth, right? Sorry, make us more aware of our self-worth and our self-growth. So I think we spoke about it earlier about the task about when I asked if it was good for journaling. It's like, yeah, it could be, but realistically, if you've got some sort of form of disordered eating, you're not going to go deeper enough into it to be able to help you. And that's where like your profession is so amazing. I just think what you do for work is just incredible, and the fact that you've gone through it all yourself just makes you so much more relatable. How would you say, just to like tie things up, how would you say life is now post ED? If you could say to someone, give someone a reason to recover, what would you say you got out of it the most?
Okay, let me just say one thing before I say what I got out of the most. Just in terms of what you were saying as well about the going deeper, like I always ask my clients, okay, and what else, and what else, you know, in the questions when they're telling me something and they're like, I don't know what else, and I'm like, okay, if you did know, because people's like defense mechanism wants to stop at a certain point rather than do all the deep digging and the changing. So obviously our brain likes what's familiar, even if what's familiar is actually hurting us.
Yeah,
sometimes it doesn't really want to change. But then so what is life like now? I would also say, so just really quickly on my story, actually after the binge eating I got bulimia as well, and then so I stopped seeing therapy. I was in denial again, and then that it was only when it got to what I feel was like the really worst point that I literally woke up thinking about food again. I went to bed thinking about food. I couldn't even just go and have a nice day going Christmas shopping. Like it was totally controlled about food. So that's when I was like, I need help again. And then I started getting help from the NHS. And then I decided that I didn't want to keep seeing them. And then luckily I already knew about psychology that I applied to myself, but I didn't know all the skills that I know now. So it's still bumpy. But I think so now, that was the other point. Then I put loads of pressure on myself to do my PhD and being a perfectionist. So that wasn't good. But now, after I like learned not to be a perfectionist, I can just do so many more things, and I just feel so much more chilled out.
Yeah.
Like I was saying to a client the other day, like when I had the eating disorder, I just had to drive everywhere as fast as I could. I was always on like, I don't even know, like I just could not relax and sit down and just chill out. And I can just do that now, and it's really nice. And I think I've got that space and clarity that now I can help other people. I can have a conversation, be present, having the conversation rather than counting calories in my head or something. Like it's just easier.
That's one of the things I noticed. I actually visited a place, was it last year maybe? I went with family, and I had been there a couple of times before, and I turned around to my stepdad and I was like, Mark, I've been here a couple of times before. I know I've been here. I remember the roads, but I don't remember. Why am I only just noticing now, like, how amazing that building is? Why am I only noticing that there's a famous fish and chip shop here? Do you know what I mean? And it was like, wow, I'm so much more present. And I still have tendencies now. Instead of fitness routes, I probably can dive, if I'm having like a tough time, I'll just work. And that's kind of like my like naughty little default mechanism. But when I'm in a really nice balanced state, I'm exactly the same with you. I'm just like, oh my god, this is all right, you know. And it's like, yeah, sure, I'll have a bit of cake. And I guess I always say that in my life all I want is freedom, and that is how I feel coming out of that. When I look back, I'm like, wow, I was so trapped, and now I'm so free.
Have a question for you actually. This is more that maybe people that are restricting would think, but do you feel out of control now?
No.
I think that's usually the biggest fear, that people are like, oh, but if I start eating more, I start eating differently, then I'll get out of control. And it's like, no, you've just got choices now.
Yeah,
the eating disorder is making you think this is control, but it's really that you've got no choices and you're just following the rules. If it's restrictive eating, obviously it's a bit different for other ones, but
if you had asked me a couple of years ago if I was living my life now, I would have said, no, if I do that, I would be lazy and I would get out of control and I'd become really fat and really awful and I'd be an awful person, I'd be lazy and blah, blah, blah. When actually, it couldn't be further from the truth. Oh, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I think people would have really got so much out of this, and are really probably able to sit back and look and say, actually, do you know what, maybe a professional might really be able to help me here, and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you so much. Where can people find you, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so is this just going on YouTube?
It might go on Instagram as well. It would depend
Bit
how
long,
much I
possibly.
end up doing.
Yeah, no, so I do actually have a YouTube channel, which I never thought I would be a YouTuber, but it's because, we didn't talk about it, but I do emotional freedom technique as well, which is like the tapping. And so I've literally got like 3 tapping videos because I don't get around to all of it. So yeah, you can look on there. Or
do we have time? Oh, do you have time just to quickly give an overview of tapping?
Oh yeah, so basically it's because as well, like my like little thing is like I like to work with your past, present and your future. So I think we talked about the past with the hypnotherapy, and then also with that too, looking what do you want your future life to be like and helping you get there, and present giving you tools for now. But then I'm also like, I want to work at the conscious level, but we know if we're just working at conscious level, that doesn't really work since eating disorders are quite illogical, so we're not really going to get there. Subconscious level, and then also like an energetic physical level. So obviously nutrition is physical, but then also energetic, because I think people do store trauma in their body, and so we need to work with that too. And so tapping, it's kind of based on more like Chinese medicine and acupuncture points and like energy lines in our body. And so it's kind of thinking like imagine when you're like really sad and down, that your whole energy changes, doesn't it? And people are usually quite like, okay, feeling really, or sometimes like when I used to feel really sad, I would just feel like I was stuck to the sofa, like really down. Whereas if you're happy, it's a totally different energy. It's like, oh, how do I... And so we can actually change our state and our feelings very quickly. And so like by tapping on the different things, and then also we can think about different beliefs that we want to change our opinion on, and we can tap on those beliefs as well and start to change our energy and our beliefs around them. So I think one of my videos is about feeling guilty about food, and then I think one of them is about body image. I'll have to check.
Okay, wicked. So I'll leave all your YouTube link below. That's amazing. I'm really into tapping as well.
Yeah.
So where else can everyone find you?
Oh yeah, so my website is eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. I thought that was quite a good one to pick. And on social media, I am rachel.evans.phd.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. So if you enjoyed this video, please can you give it a like and consider subscribing to my YouTube my YouTube channel. If you are on Instagram and I managed to upload this, then cool. Could you maybe give it a like, comment down below what you enjoyed it, and share it to your story, because as we know, the algorithms aren't that friendly at the moment. And it just really helped Rachel and I get our message out to the people that might need it. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Bye.